The candlelight caught the edge of Sarah's wine glass, sending fractured beams across our anniversary dinner table at Le Bernardin. 15 years of marriage crystallized in that moment, the soft glow of the restaurant's lighting smoothing the few lines that had formed around her eyes, her fingers absently turning her wedding band. The same elegant fingers I'd slipped that ring onto a decade and a half ago. The 82 Bordeaux, I told the sommelier, maintaining my tradition of selecting a vintage from our wedding year. It seems fitting for tonight. Sarah's smile flickered, a momentary breach in her usual composure that I might have missed had I not spent half my life reading her expressions. Something was off, had been off all evening. The way she'd hesitated when I'd suggested Le Bernardin, how she'd changed her dress twice before we left, the slight tremor in her hand as she reached for her water glass. "James," she said, my name carrying a weight I'd never heard before. "There's something I need to tell you." The sommelier was still hovering, corkscrew poised. I nodded him away, the practiced ease of a CEO dismissing an interruption. But this wasn't the boardroom, and the tremble in Sarah's voice had nothing to do with quarterly reports or merger discussions. She paused, her fingers now white-knuckled around the stem of her empty wine glass. "I've been seeing someone." The restaurant's ambient noise faded to a hollow buzz. I stared at her, wondering if I'd misheard, if this was some elaborate setup for a different conversation. But the tears welling in her eyes told me otherwise. 8 months, she continued, words spilling out now like a dam had broken. "I never meant for it to happen. It just did. And you deserve to know. You deserve the truth." "Who?" The question came out surprisingly steady, even as I felt the foundations of my world beginning to crack. She looked down at the pristine tablecloth, at the anniversary card I'd given her earlier, still unopened beside her plate. Michael. My vice president. The man I'd mentored for 6 years, who'd stood beside me at company galas, who'd been in our home countless times for dinner parties and summer barbecues. Michael, who'd helped me plan Sarah's surprise 40th birthday party just last year. "I'm so sorry, James." Stop. I raised my hand, CEO style again, an instinctive gesture of control when I felt anything but in control. The restaurant's warmth had turned suffocating, the intimate lighting now harsh and exposing. Somewhere nearby, a couple was laughing over dessert, the sound grating against my ears like broken glass. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. 15 years of shared memories seemed to rewrite themselves before my eyes. Every late meeting with Michael, every business trip, every casual mention of running into him at the coffee shop near her gallery. How many of those had been lies? How long had they been laughing at me, playing me for a fool in my own company, my own home? The sommelier returned with our wine, oblivious to the devastation unfolding at his table. I watched him pour a taste into my glass, the ritual suddenly absurd in its normalcy. The deep red liquid swirled, looking less like celebration and more like blood. "Would you like to taste, sir?" he asked, professional smile firmly in place. I looked at the wine, then at Sarah, then back at the wine. 15 years, bottled and aged to perfection, now turned to vinegar in my mouth. "No," I said quietly, my voice carrying an edge that made Sarah flinch. "I don't think we'll be celebrating tonight after all." The drive home was a study in silence. Sarah kept her face turned to the window, streetlights painting stark shadows across her features. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened, muscle memory guiding us through familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign. "How long have you been planning to tell me?" My voice cut through the silence as we entered our driveway. The house loomed before us, every lit window a reminder of the life we'd built, the life she'd betrayed. Sarah's voice cracked. "After the Miller merger closes next month." Michael thought. I killed the engine, darkness enveloping us. "So you two discussed the optimal timing for destroying my life?" Inside, Sarah moved through our kitchen like a ghost, her heels clicking against the marble floors we'd picked out together last spring. I watched her pour herself a glass of water, her hands shaking so badly she spilled some on the counter. It wasn't planned, James. We never meant to get caught? The laugh that escaped me sounded foreign to my own ears. Tell me, did you fuck him in my office? During all those late-night strategy sessions? Her flinch answered my question before her tears did. I turned away, moving to my study, my sanctuary. The familiar leather and mahogany should have been comforting, but all I could see was Michael sitting in that chair across from my desk, discussing quarterly projections while probably thinking about my wife. My phone buzzed. Messages from the board about tomorrow's meeting. Emails about the Miller merger. The mundane machinery of business grinding on while my personal life imploded. I stared at Michael's name in my contact list, his corporate headshot smiling back at me with manufactured sincerity. Sarah appeared in the doorway, still in her anniversary dress. We need to talk about this. About what? I kept my voice steady, CO calm. About how my vice president has been fucking my wife? Or about how you two plan to tell me after the merger, when the company's stock would be too volatile for me to fire him without triggering a shareholder panic? Her silence confirmed my suspicions. Even in betrayal, they'd been calculating. I turned to my computer, pulling up the company's financial records. Sarah was still talking, something about couples counseling, about fixing things, but my mind was already racing ahead. Board positions, stock options, offshore accounts, properties. James, please look at me. I did. For a moment, I saw the woman I'd married, the artist who'd stolen my heart with her passion for beauty and truth. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone who'd plotted betrayal over breakfast in our bed. Get out of my study, I said quietly. Pack whatever you need for tonight and go to your sister's. We'll discuss logistics tomorrow. James. Now. After she left, I sat in the growing darkness, listening to her move through our bedroom, drawers opening and closing. Each sound was a paper cut to my composure. But beneath the pain, something else was crystallizing, a cold, hard clarity of purpose. I opened my private email, created a new encrypted folder, and began to type. By midnight, I would have the blueprint for their destruction. By morning, I would set it in motion. They had taken everything from me. I would return the favor. At midnight, our joint accounts emptied into a series of offshore holdings. Sarah's credit cards died silently in her wallet while she slept at her sister's. By 12:15, our shared investment portfolio had been liquidated, the assets redistributed through a maze of shell companies I'd spent years establishing for corporate acquisitions. I moved through our house like a ghost, systematically documenting everything of value. The Monet sheet acquired for the gallery last spring, purchased with company funds through an art investment initiative. The vacation property in Aspen, listed under a corporate subsidiary. The charitable foundation she chaired, funded entirely through company donations. My laptop cast a blue glow across my desk as I drafted emails, each one a carefully aimed arrow. To the board, concerns about financial irregularities in Michael's division. To legal, a request for a comprehensive audit. To HR, an anonymous tip about inappropriate relationships affecting company decisions. The security footage from my office downloaded slowly, months of late-night meetings, each timestamp a new wound. I watched them enter separately, leave separately, their professional masks perfect except for the moments they thought no one was watching. Every subtle touch, every lingering look, now preserved as evidence. Dawn found me in our walk-in closet, surrounded by the artifacts of our marriage. Her dresses still carried her perfume, Chanel No. 5, the same scent she'd worn on our wedding day. I boxed her jewelry methodically, cataloging each piece, anniversary diamonds, birthday sapphires, just because pearls. 15 years of devotion, reduced to a spreadsheet of assets. My phone buzzed, Michael, arriving early at the office as usual. James? His voice carried its usual mix of respect and familiarity. I heard about dinner. Sarah called. Michael. I cut him off, my voice professionally pleasant. Perfect timing. Could you join me in the conference room? The Miller team raised some concerns about the merger projections. Of course. A pause. James, about Sarah. The Miller numbers first, I said. Everything else can wait. I ended the call and straightened my tie, muscle memory from countless mornings. In my briefcase, documents proving years of Michael's creative accounting, evidence of decisions that coincidentally benefited Sarah's gallery, a paper trail leading to private accounts they thought were hidden. The sun rose over the city as my driver pulled up. I checked my watch, Swiss, a gift from Sarah on our 10th anniversary. In 3 hours, the board would receive their packets. In 4, legal would freeze certain accounts pending investigation. By lunch, Michael's carefully constructed career would begin to crumble. And Sarah? By now she'd be waking at her sister's, reaching for her phone to check her gallery's accounts. She'd find them empty, her corporate credit lines frozen, her professional reputation caught in the blast radius of Michael's impending disgrace. They'd taken my trust. I would take everything else. The city blurred past my window as we drove toward the office. My wedding ring caught the morning light, and for a moment I saw their faces, Sarah's tears at dinner, Michael's forced professional smile. Soon they would understand what it meant to lose everything they'd built. I slipped the ring into my pocket. It was time to go to work. 1 year after the anniversary dinner, I watched Michael load the last of his possessions into a rental truck. His corner office had been vacant for months, but his suburban home, the one he'd bragged about at company parties, had taken longer to lose. The foreclosure papers had finally gone through last week. Sarah's gallery had closed 6 months ago, her reputation in the art world tainted by association with Michael's financial scandal. She'd tried to rebuild in Chicago, but the art community was smaller than she'd imagined, and whispers traveled fast. I observed it all from a distance, like watching a film I'd scripted but wasn't starring in. Each morning, I reviewed the reports, Michael's legal fees mounting, Sarah's failed attempts to access our old accounts, their separate but intertwined downfalls playing out exactly as I'd planned. The victory felt hollow. At night, I wandered through our empty house, my house now, touching the blank spaces where Sarah's paintings had hung. The silence was deafening. I'd won, destroyed them both professionally and personally, but the cost of victory was everywhere, in the empty chair at my dining table, in the untouched side of my bed, in the echoing halls that had once held our laughter. The company thrived under new leadership. I'd stepped down as CEO 3 months after everything imploded, claiming personal reasons. The board had been understanding, almost too understanding. They'd seen the evidence against Michael, watched the scandal unfold, and drawn their own conclusions about my graceful exit. My phone buzzed occasionally with texts from Sarah, each one deleted unread. What could she possibly say that would matter now? That she was sorry? That she missed our life? That she'd realized too late what she'd thrown away? The words would be as empty as our closets, as meaningless as the wedding photos I'd packed away in the attic. Some nights, I pulled up the security footage I'd saved, their secret meetings, the stolen glances, the casual touches that had meant so much more. I watched it with clinical detachment, trying to pinpoint the exact moment my life had derailed. Was it the first time they'd kissed in my office? The first lie about working late? The first shared secret that had excluded me? The revenge had been perfect, calculated, complete. I'd taken everything, their careers, their reputations, their futures. I'd watched them scramble to salvage what they could, watched them turn on each other when the pressure mounted. Michael had thrown Sarah under the bus during the investigation, trying to save himself. Sarah had retaliated with her own revelations about his financial misconduct. They'd destroyed each other almost as thoroughly as I destroyed them. But sitting in my empty house, surrounded by the fruits of my revenge, I realized something that all my careful planning hadn't accounted for: you can't burn down your own life without getting scarred by the flames. Every victory felt Pyrrhic, every accomplished goal tasted of ash. I'd won the war, but the battlefield was my own heart, and there were no survivors here. I met Diana at a gallery opening in Soho, 2 years after the divorce. She was critiquing a particularly pretentious installation, and her laugh caught me off guard. It had been so long since I'd laughed myself. The artist calls it betrayal in blue, she said. Guess. Touring at the twisted metal sculpture. I call it Trust Fund Kid's first welding project. I smiled despite myself. She wasn't Sarah, no one would ever be Sarah, but perhaps that was the point. My therapist, Dr. Chen, had been pushing me to engage with art again. She knew the whole story, how I'd systematically dismantled my life along with theirs. Healing isn't about forgetting, she'd said. It's about reclaiming what was lost. The company ran smoothly without me. My replacement had done well, steering clear of the scandal's aftermath. I'd kept my board position, attending quarterly meetings where Michael's name never came up. The Miller merger had gone through, ironically more successful without his creative accounting. Diana was an architect, someone who built things rather than tearing them down. She asked about my past once, over coffee. I told her the broad strokes: marriage, betrayal, divorce. She didn't push for details, didn't offer platitudes about time healing all wounds. My ex-husband left me for his dental hygienist, she said instead. I spent a year imagining creative uses for his dental equipment before I realized I was only hurting myself. Slowly, I started living again. Donated Sarah's untouched jewelry to charity. Converted her studio into a home office. Learned to cook instead of staring at takeout containers. Small steps, Dr. Chen called them. Building blocks of a new life. The nightmares came less frequently now. I no longer woke reaching for Sarah's side of the bed. The security footage gathered dust on a hard drive I couldn't quite bring myself to delete. You don't have to be defined by what they did, Dr. Chen said during one session. Or by what you did after. Then what defines me? What you choose to do next. I chose to live. Joined a nonprofit board. Mentored young entrepreneurs. Had dinner with Diana without checking her background or scanning for hidden motives. Let myself feel something besides anger and betrayal. The revenge had been thorough, but the real victory wasn't in their destruction, it was in my reconstruction. I'd rebuilt myself from the ground up, stronger in the broken places. One evening, I found Sarah's old anniversary card, still unopened from that night. I didn't read it. Instead, I lit a fire in the backyard and watched it burn, letting the past turn to ash while the future waited, unwritten and full of possibility. They were waiting at my favorite coffee shop, Sarah and Michael, sitting awkwardly apart at a corner table. 3 years had aged them differently. Sarah looked thinner, sharper, while Michael had grown soft around the edges. Their lawyers had arranged this meeting. Closure, they called it. James, Sarah said, half rising. I gestured for her to stay seated. You're looking well, Michael tried, his sales pitch smile failing him. I ordered my usual from the barista. She knew me now, had watched me rebuild my life one cappuccino at a time. Diana had suggested this place for the meeting. Neutral ground, she'd said, but your territory. We wanted to apologize, Sarah began. What we did was 3 years ago, I interrupted, stirring my coffee. Ancient history. Michael shifted uncomfortably. The company's doing well. I saw the quarterly reports. Is that why you're here? Business? No, Sarah said. We're here because we need to move on. All of us. I studied them both. The affair had lasted 8 months. My revenge had taken 3 years. Their careers were in shambles, their reputations tarnished. Everything I'd planned had worked perfectly. And none of it mattered anymore. I forgive you, I said quietly. They stared at me, stunned. It wasn't what they'd expected, wasn't what I'd expected to say, either. But it was true. Not for you, I continued. For me. I'm done carrying this. I stood, leaving my coffee mostly untouched. Outside, Diana waited in our car, reading architectural plans for the house we'd bought together. My new life, built on something stronger than revenge. Goodbye, Sarah. Michael. I walked away without looking back. The morning sun fell warm on my face, and somewhere in the distance, I heard laughter.